The professor of a university challenged the students one day with this question: Did God create everything that exists? A student answered bravely, yes, he did. The professor then asked, if God created everything, then he also created evil. Since evil exists, this means God is evil. The student couldn't respond to that statement, causing the professor to conclude that he had proved that belief in God was a fairy tale and therefore worthless. However, another student raised his hand and asked the professor, may I pose a question? Of course, answered the professor. The young student stood up and asked, Professor, does cold exist? The professor answered, what kind of question is that? Of course cold exists. Haven't you ever been cold? The young student answered, in fact, sir, cold does not exist. According to the laws of physics, what we consider cold is in fact the absence of heat. In this field, all things are able to be studied as long as they transmit energy, or heat. Absolute zero is the total absence of heat. But cold, in itself, does not exist. What we have done is to create a term to describe how we feel if we don't have heat. Furthermore, does darkness exist? He continued. The professor answered, of course. This time the student responded, again, you are wrong, sir. Darkness does not exist either. Darkness is simply the absence of light. Light can be studied and broken down into individual spectrums. Darkness cannot be broken down and studied. A simple ray of light tears the darkness and illuminates the surface where the light beam ends. Dark is a term that we as humans have created to describe what happens when there is a lack of light. Finally, the student asked the professor, sir, does evil exist? The professor replied, of course it exists. As I mentioned at the beginning, we see violations of all sorts, crimes and violence everywhere in the world. These things are obviously evil. The student responded, sir, evil does not exist. Just as in the previous cases, evil is nothing more than a term which man has created to describe the result of the absence of God's presence in the hearts of man. After this, the professor bowed down his head and did not answer back. The young student that stood up to speak that day was Albert Einstein.